All right, so welcome everybody. This is a new this is the new international webinar series titled New Leisure Studies International Perspectives. This webinar is organized by a group of 7 organizations from across the world, including Australian and New Zealand Association of Leisure Studies, Canadian Association of Leisure Studies, China International Leisure Research Association, Leisure Studies Association, Sociology of Leisure, the Academy of Leisure Sciences, and the World Leisure Organization. This webinar will be recorded, and the information about this webinar and panelists, as well as information about our previous webinars and future webinars, can be found at the link that I will post in a second in our chat. And we are also circulating updates about the website, about the webinar through the listservs of 7 of these peer organizations who organized this webinar. My name is Irina Sharievska, and I represent Clemson University and the Academy of Leisure Sciences. And I also would like to introduce my host, our host today, Dr. Ingrid Schneider, professor at the Department of Forest Resources at the University of Minnesota, and also Dr. Mona Murahe, Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, who is going to help me moderate this session today. If you have, I also would like to thank the TALS Global Relevance Committee in assistant who was preparing this webinar. We encourage you to have questions posted in a chat box or in a Q&A section, and we'll be happy to have this discussion here today. So without further delay, I'm gonna pass this presentation to Ingrid, and thank you to all the panelists for being here today and for all the audience to be engaged and present in the discussion. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm delighted to see many of you here and look forward to others watching this at their leisure. So we have a terrific panel today focused on work and leisure balance with such important implications moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and start to introduce them just ever so briefly. They all have extensive histories that they can share, perhaps in another conversation with you if and when you follow up with them. But in alphabetical order, we've got Dr. Brooke Burke from Minnesota State University, just south of me here in Minnesota in the United States. Brooke is a professor in the Department of Recreation, Parks, and Leisure Services there, and also the director for the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. She's representing the Academy of Leisure Sciences today, and her interests include interpersonal education opportunities, the impact of recreation on literacy skill improvement among children with disabilities, and reading and writing delays. She got her PhD at the University of Illinois. Welcome, Brooke. Our second panelist is Dr. Sukant Chowdhury, who is a professor in the Department of Sociology, University of Lucknow in India. Welcome. He is also an international visiting faculty in the Mauritius at a university there, and also University of Birmingham. He's representing the Sociology of Leisure group, and his interests, understandably, include the sociology of leisure, environment, tribal relations, and tribal culture, and methodology. His PhD is from the University of Delhi. And our third panelist is Dr. Aggie Wayhill, who's a faculty member in the Department of Recreation and Tourism Management at Vancouver Island University, and also a research associate at the World Leisure Center of Excellence. She is representing the Canadian Association of Leisure Sciences. And Aggie's interests include women's engagement in leisure, women's livelihoods in tourism and conservation areas, community-based tourism, and knowledge mobilization. Aggie's PhD is from the University of Alberta. So with that, I think I'm going to stop the share so we can see the panelists' faces more clearly and start into our questions. Just a little overview of the panel today. We've got 3 main questions that we've asked our panelists to think on, and we will address them in order, giving everyone up to 5 minutes to individually respond, and then some time for discussion. And we will also take questions both in the chat, is probably the preferred area, and then we will bring those to our panelists. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start in reverse alphabetical order, because I always felt bad for those people at the end of the alphabet. So our first question is, with advancing technology, the work-leisure balance has been blurred and it's been exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic. What's the status of work-life balance in your country? And what elements do you anticipate will stay with us and carried forward into the 2020s? Aggie, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I usually have the comfort of waiting till the end. So flipping the script on me. I think this is this is obviously a really come to forefront in Canada during the pandemic. We had across the country, we had sort of, it's hard to say lockdown in a context here, because when we look at Europe and other places, our definition of lockdown was a lot less stringent than many other places. But we definitely had that exodus from the traditional workforce to working at home. But there's a caveat on that. That was really for professionals, right? It was for people who had largely office jobs, who had that flexibility of moving home. So the technology piece in there, I think for a lot of workforces, you flip the script. You did exactly the same thing you did in the office, but you did it at home. The blurring of the line became the fact that, depending how forward facing your job is and whether you had to have the camera on for those meetings, you might have been in your pajamas, you might have been dressed normally and whatnot. I think that we've seen the research is showing that people like this. People are really liking this flexibility, and 90% of those people who have switched from working at home are wanting to continue that post-pandemic. That's what the research is showing at the national level here. At the same time, we have some segments of the workforce where they're chomping at the bit to get back into the sort of the social connection, and so flexibility is the word going forward. At the same time, I think that the reliance on technology, the fact that many of us have switched from only accessing our work emails and other things on a computer, and now we're doing it on multiple devices, has really blurred that line. And so the research on Canada is showing right now that some of the patterns that we saw pre-COVID are carrying through. Canadians don't take all their holidays every year. And so I think the stats say on average, Canadians get about 17 and a half days of holiday a year. 13 to 14 days is what most are taking. So we're leaving holidays on the table. And I think the other piece that I want to highlight at this point is that the vast majority of the discussion around work-life balance in Canada is really focusing on those jobs that are one person full-time in one position. We're not really seeing the statistics, and I'm not even seeing it from our national level on those individuals who are working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. And so I think when I think about what's going to be carried over in the future, I think more flexibility. I think more workaholism, if we can go there. But I also think that we have to start thinking about this differently. So I'll leave it there for now.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciated your point about the multimodal access and the flexibility. Absolutely. Let's move across the world and ask these same questions in terms of the status of this work-life balance blending into each other, and if and how it moves into the 2020s. Sukant, would you like to share? may be muted.
Which one? The second question?
The first question, please.
The first question. What is happening in India, isn't it? What has happened in India? Number one, I'll tell you in few points. Number one, that because of the pandemic, such kind of things happen in leisure activities which one can never imagine. Number one. Number two, India is a country of about 1,300 million people. 1,300 million people. Okay. Out of which about 48 to 50% people are poor. Poor means in sociologically, we distinguish them into, wait a second, you have to tell me before 1 minute to end, okay? You got to tell me. All right. So what happens that, what is that I was saying? Okay. So about 48 to 50% poor, the government figure is different. Government figure is only 26%. But we understand those who do not get safe drinking water, and those who do not have electricity, and those who do not have clean air facility, and so many things. We, as sociologists in social development, we consider those cases also, those criteria as well. Therefore, we say about 50% are from lower class. So we have divided accordingly. I have made this thing interview, e-interview obviously, on telephonic interview and also email. There were 60 respondents, case study, 60 respondents, okay, proper research, and it is going to be finalized. The writing is going on. On the basis of that only, I'll be able to tell you what is happening in India, okay, where we have divided it into, and you must know that distribution of income opportunities for education and enlightenment is not equal throughout the world. That also happens in India. In your country, everywhere, income inequality is terrible. I mean, there is a huge gap of lower class and upper class in Western countries, but there is no huge gap here. There is a huge gap there, no huge gap here. Don't include those 7 rich people or 10 rich people. Include the upper class. So here we have the, I'll just tell you, I'll read it out. What was happening earlier and what is happening now, okay? The first one is upper class. Earlier, it is upper, lower, upper middle, lower middle, upper, lower, lower. David Warner, okay? The classification is made like this. So upper, they were holidaying abroad, okay? Holidaying abroad. And short breaks and long breaks, celebrating all Western model, birthday, Valentine Day, Christmas Day, New Year Day. This is all upper, topmost, and moving in their own aircraft, like this. What has happened now? That is all stopped. They all have farmhouses. You understand farmhouses? Resorts of their own. Resorts and farmhouses of their own, and tried to enjoy there, but they got bored. Most of them are intoxicated. So intoxication, you understand intoxication, maybe drug or maybe liquor, some kind of intoxication goes on, and they had plenty. Despite the lockdown, they had plenty in stock. So there was no problem in intoxication. And then online gaming and all those online OTT, Netflix, this and that. Okay. Now coming to the lower upper, almost similar things, not much difference in upper and lower upper. Now coming to upper middle. Upper middle is also called emerging middle. Some emerging middle class went into upper middle in the past 30 years because of globalization, liberalization, and privatization. Okay. What is happening? They used to have all these features because of better tourism facilities, better air facilities, better transport facilities, better, automobile industry, so many things. So they also did all this, but they used to have one more thing. It is called pilgrimage, sociology of religion. Pilgrimage is very important in India. Okay. So they used to combine pilgrimage with work. Then also offline, pilgrimage with work. Okay. Almost all the pilgrim centers in India, important pilgrim centers, have air facilities. Okay, you can travel by, you can fly, you can have helicopter services if it is in the hills. So they would go, and they will also combine work, and periodically they would go. What has happened now? That has stopped, completely stopped. Even now it has stopped because of, in light of Omicron variety, the new wave. Everybody is in, the whole damn thing is jeopardized, and all are in a shock now. What is happening? Me too. I am also in a shock. I was supposed to, because of many positions, I am supposed to deliver this speech, that speech, inaugural speech, all India speech, that conference, this conference, and so many things. I am also the editor of one of the important journals, 75 years old journals, Scopus listed, now delisted for some time. And then also in our country, it is called University Grant Commission listed journal. So there also you have to speak here, there, and so many things. But I have stopped going to anywhere in the past 20 months. Like me, others are also. So it is all upper middle class values. So all now online or hybrid. Then coming to lower middle class. Lower middle class were having pilgrimage with family, but not air, of course. Bus transport or train transport like this. Chewing tobacco, cigarette, local cigarette, country-made cigarette, enjoying the food and drinks. Drinks means always hard drinks. Hard drinks means always those liquor type. Okay. Then these days they suffered a lot because of lockdown, because there was no drink. The liquor shops were closed probably for 90 days. So 90 days was huge. Some of them went into shock, and they faced a lot of problem. They say that they are absolutely boring life, and some of them, they do not know how to operate these Netflix, this and that, and how can they subscribe, because there is no credit card, there is no debit card, there is no net banking facility. They do not know about it, they are ignorant about it, they are not e-savvy, so they are facing a lot of crisis and problem. Then coming to upper lower and lower layer. Upper lower and lower, this lower section, they could not afford all these things. They could only afford local pilgrimage within 100 kilometers pilgrimage. They could not afford. So now also they have stopped everything, and they suffered from almost like begging. They could not get food. The government had to provide food. The voluntary organizations and non-government organizations had to provide food. So these days what is happening? Holidaying has stopped. Gambling is there. Okay, I'll stop in 30 seconds. Gambling, you understand gambling? Gambling is a good hobby, and gambling has started in-house gambling, not going out station. Then these kind of things are very favorite. People are feeling very boring. Online teaching, online education, online thing, all the time online. We are enjoying online. We have no issue online classes, online seminars and conferences, but we are enjoying this. But others are not enjoying. Like me, my fellow professors are not enjoying. They say, no, it is very boring. Writing in a blackboard and speaking loudly is much better than speaking here and there. Like this, the trend goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that really specific and timely, hot, not even off the press, still in press information about what's happening there. Certainly we can see some parallels with the US, and perhaps Brooke can share some of those and speak to what is happening. Thank you so much, Brooke.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. To parallel what the other two panelists have talked about, a lot of terminology in the United States is about this desire to return to normal. In comparison to this desire to have vacations and holiday types of experiences, folks there's definitely this political divide in the United States about a desire to return to normal, and how do we provide for and acknowledge an ethic of care. In the United States, another great thing that has come about, and I think white folks in particular are becoming more aware of the racialized inequities that we're seeing in education and healthcare and workplace policies and the like. The list can go on, and we have had countless examples in the United States, whether you have seen, national headlines about the use of police among individuals, Black and brown people, particularly in the United States, when we think about concerns related to critical race theory. All of these things, while not directly related to work and leisure, have come about really with as part of the pandemic, as folks are thinking about inequities across the board that the pandemic has brought to light. And really, as the other folks have mentioned, privilege plays a big role in the work when we think about this idea of work and leisure balance. And as mentioned, the economy and the desire for a strong economy, just money in general, I would say, and the drive to make money and be able to spend it in ways that you want has really superseded a care model. And that's really placed a burden on those with children, particularly women. Women and girls account for 75% of the world's unpaid work. And so when we think about ways to address those barriers, some things that have been adopted in the United States are flexible work policies. And it's really thought to be a strategy to support parents, particularly mothers, so they can complete their occupational responsibilities as well as caregiving. But really what it's leading to is this feeling of exhaustion that women are feeling. Again, these are privileged women who do have work in places where there is that flexibility. Flexible work policies in the United States have definitely favored men who are able to work more. Again, that extra pay is, or that extra work is unpaid, but what it allows them to do is to advance within their careers and do extra work, where that is not the case necessarily for women. I had the opportunity in my current position to do some work with students and surveying and focus groups and hearing about their experiences throughout this pandemic. And we, in the United States, oftentimes think of a student as this 18 to 22-year-old who has no other responsibilities but to be educated. And that's not what we're seeing in the United States. And college tuition is increasing exponentially. And we are seeing, even in our area, a lot more first generation students who are balancing so many things, families, work, and the like. And so thinking about that and our students' experiences, as many of us, I'm sure, in this webinar today are educators, about 2/3 of our students are working more than 20 hours a week, and they're attempting to manage school, tuition, life, and work. Most of our students were working 30 or more hours to make ends meet and are also full-time students. So when we think about the work-leisure balance, there really isn't, because they have multiple definitions for work, right? They may have a particular occupation, but school is also oftentimes work. And one of the most concerning statistics out of some of that work is that 11% of our students told us that they don't have a friend to support them generally. And that is extremely sad, particularly our students who are from first generation and international populations, and not having those supports. Thinking about faculty feeling very disconnected throughout the pandemic from one another, feeling unsupported by their institutions, with little care for their well-being or leisure. A lot of our policies when it comes to telework was, things that we were seeing is you need to report at the end of the day everything that you've accomplished, because how could you as a human being manage your own time and accomplish the things that you need to accomplish? And those policies are pervasive in organizations across the United States. That idea that someone it cannot guide their own time. And then, mothers, again, privileged enough to work at home and are balancing childcare and child education. I experienced that myself, and I know many others have as well. And from my privileged point of view, it was exhausting, and those with children were exiting the workforce significantly higher than others, because finding childcare facilities shut down in the pandemic as well. Was it safe? You're balancing all of those things of how do I protect my child from this disease that could have great harm to them or others that we are in our home, if you think about multi-generational homes as well. And so that was a big concern as well. Just some information, it says that general research says that nearly half of women in the US say they're negatively impacted by the pandemic, with 1.8 million saying that they have been pushed out of the workforce. And that's a significant amount of individuals. I think the most concerning thing within the United States that we are seeing is this loss of humanizing part of our work, that individuals are almost robots and can function and do the things that they need to do and should be productive, not recognizing all of our layers of identity and responsibilities and needs in order to be people and part of society and happy as we think about leisure. And work shortages are going to really require employees to look at policies and ways to help people feel valued. And something as we think about moving forward is the need for humanizing all of the work that we are doing at all levels of an organization.
Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate that, both kind of big and smaller scale information. I want to allow the panelists to respond and comment in the same order if desired, and then I see we have a question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's always nerve-wracking to go first, because it's not until everyone else is speaking you go, oh, I could have said this or that. First of all, I actually want to acknowledge that I am coming to you today from the unceded territory of the Nanaimo First Nation here in Nanaimo, British Columbia. It was really interesting listening to this, because listening to the substance use and in some cases substance abuse in India. That's one of the things that percolated out in Canada as well. We seem to have this sort of bimodal population effect, where about 30% of our population started drinking less and using drugs less, and 30% started using it more. Here in British Columbia, the liquor stores were deemed essential. So they were one of the businesses that stayed open. And the argument around that was the harm reduction for individuals who suffer from alcoholism and cutting supply. But we saw a dramatic increase, the highest sales in beer and wine that they had seen in very long time during those pandemic pieces. So definitely people, that home-based leisure of sort of dulling the senses, as it were. And the Stats Canada did some research and found that boredom, stress, and convenience were actually the top 3 reasons for the increase in those activities. And that was in people who were working at home, as well as people who were potentially temporarily out of work. The other piece that I think is really interesting is when we look at the diversity of jobs, and we look at, from the privileged who were able to switch at home fairly quickly to those who were still frontline, sort of front-facing positions, we temporarily saw this elevation of status in some of those positions. So individuals who are working in grocery stores as tellers and clerks were elevated as essential, and we were celebrating them. And that is really reverted back very quickly to normal, to that it's no longer that sort of celebrated position. And the politicizing of COVID hasn't been to the same degree in Canada as it is to the States, but it's still been politicized as it has in much of the Western world. And so we are seeing, one of the groups who has arguably absolutely zero work-life balance are healthcare workers. becoming targets of that, which is just exacerbating that complete exhaustion that's being felt there. Like the United States, Canada has experienced the exodus of women from the workforce. And there is some predictions that it is set back gender equity within the workforce by decades to try to come back into that. And we're still, like many other jurisdictions, we're still having sort of rotating school closures due to exposures. And children, unpredictably, I think it was even better when it was somewhat predictable. You knew your child was going to be at home. Now it's this unpredictable nature and trying to balance those things out. And so there really is these sort of parallels that even though our population structures are quite a bit different, Canada has about 10% the population of the United States. I don't even know that we're a fraction of India. And so we still see those parallels running through. And I think some of those places where we see the greatest parallels are going to be in our racialized populations. So persons of color and the inequity that is being brought to the surface there. Some of our sort of most challenged populations were immigrant populations or sections of urban centers where it was predominantly immigrant populations who live in crowded households. And I sort of one of the other things I want to layer in on here is that during the pandemic, our housing market has exploded. We have some of the most expensive cities to live in the world, and that has added a whole other layer into this work-life balance piece. Because if you live in a Canadian urban center and you are not sharing your home with a lot of other people who are contributing to the economic health of the community, it really becomes a work burden to just pay for your housing. So in British Columbia, the average is somewhere around 40 to 45% of your income is now going to housing. And it can be worse if you're living in Vancouver. So I think some of those things are also layering into this, that the real reality, particularly for millennials trying to enter into professions, is that they have a different economic world that they're entering in. I'm done.
Well, you could have had up to one more minute, but okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is part of the panel, the discussion, the interplay. So Dr. Chaudhry, anything to add or comment on based on the other panelists at this time? Oh.
This is the first question going on? Yeah, the first one. All right. I mean, we have spoken about our own things. Now, I would just like to say a few things. What are the studies conducted here in India? About 5 million people in India. There is no difference between work and leisure before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, 5 million people did not have the difference between work and leisure. Blurred, absolutely blurred, whatever questions you have asked. And they have erased the boundaries. Okay. Now, there is no more, there is no more estimate after the pandemic. Something must be going on. I think it will be now exponentially very high. Almost 90% people, this is what we expect to have blurred or erased the boundary between these two, okay, work and leisure. So this is a very important thing. But what is a new trend of leisure? What is that? Better physic and better mental health. All right. This is also going on. This is very important, It was not there earlier. Now, better physic, better mental health, good medicine, good supplements, and good food and drinking habits.
I think we'll move into this in our next question. So I'm going to hold you back there. But you get to start the next question. So we'll. You will, but we'll see if Brooke has anything to add.
All right. The next question is.
Just a moment. Just a moment, please. So just a sec.
Just to reiterate, much like Canada, there with the unpredictability of, lockdown experiences and when you might have to, quarantine and all of that. It also within the United States varied from state to state and community to community, and the response continues to vary. Some folks have worked really hard legislatively within states for that idea of return to normal, and so their experiences are very different depending upon the leadership within each state within the United States. And I think that unknowing is definitely causing anxiety for folks as well. And just to underscore all of the things that we've mentioned, an attention to mental health has been a big focus within the United States as well. We definitely do not have enough practitioners to support the need for mental health on our campus. Just thinking about student mental health alone, there are wait lists that are weeks, months long. When we think about faculty trying to get access to resources, the campus doesn't have anything. And so they're going to external resources, which again, community is overwhelmed with the need for folks to find that support.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to transition as we've started to a little bit into this next question that we posed to our panelists. And the question was, in this new era of work as you like for the middle upper class and in-person work for others, as you've all mentioned, if and how can providers adapt or adopt to provide leisure for all? And how shall researchers approach this bifurcated leisure condition? And we had a question from the audience, particularly focused on outdoor recreation and the surge of that. And we know that improves mental and physical health. So the essence is, how can providers adapt to provide leisure for all? Starting off. Dr. Sukkot, you want to check us out? Start us off?
All right, thank you, Ingrid. So what will be there? As I was just pointing out that the researcher, they must delve into a few things that we are now there is nothing called this is the final concluding observation. There is nothing called concluding observation in this case. Studies are going on. Studies will point out after some time, but what will be there? What should be there? What should be the focus? In Indian case, okay, out of those only 6 kinds of classes, what is happening? One is the positive side, another is the negative side. So you pointed out only to middle and upper class. So in the adult category of middle and upper class, we have about only about 21 plus 1 plus 0.8 means about 29% Indian. Out of 140, 1300 million people, 29% only will have this, means about 300 million. Okay, but the rest all are belonging to the lower class, But anyway, what is the trend in this class? These 2 classes you have asked, posed this question. Better physical and mental health, the positive side of it. Better physical and mental health. They must research on this. What is this? How it will be better? Why? And both quantitative and qualitative. So क्या कहते हैं ट्राई मेथोडोलॉजी को, both quantitative and mixed method. Only quantitative will not help. Quantitative and qualitative. And these days in sociology or social sciences, qualitative is very difficult. Quantitative is easier because you put it into SPSS, any package, and it will be done. But qualitative is very difficult, but qualitative has to be done. The researcher must take qualitative, number 1. Number 2, very effective engagement with work. Very effective engagement with work means these people have become very workaholic. Somebody pointed out, probably Eggy or Brooke pointed out, that there is no boundary. Whole day working, facing the camera, whole day doing something or the other, and somehow become workaholic who were not actually workaholic earlier, because the energy is stored. Then the energy used to go traveling to the office 2 hours, 1 hour, 5 hours, 3 hours, coming back 3 hours, 2 hours, like this. So now the energy is stored, much positive energy is there, and having good food, and I said this, number 2. Number 3, increased creative thinking, reflections on self, increased creative thinking, reflection on self. For example, I am 60 now, 60 years old, okay? So a 60 years old person, always, I am a very workaholic person, doesn't matter. But here after this online thing, business, I am having, now it is about 9 o'clock in the evening, whole day we are working from morning 6, now it is 9. We go to work it like this only in India, and we get proper salary also, there is no problem. So what is that? That we are still getting time, much more time to take rest, to have a creative thinking, to reflect upon myself, to reflect upon my kin, to reflect upon my friends, to reflect upon India, the country. So the language, so many things. And I have, though I'm speaking in, I know 4 languages. There are 507 languages spoken in India, 507 languages. I know at least 4 languages. And this English is obviously a foreign language for us, but we got to excel in English. I have learned more English, unlearn to learn. This is very important, unlearn to learn. So we have unlearned many things and we have learned many things. Like this is called autoethnography. You understand autoethnography? Autoethnography means talking about yourself, your experience with objectivity. That is very important. Then, so I said the 3rd point is increased creative thinking, and the 4th point is reflection on self. Okay. The 5th point is more productivity. More productivity. How those offices, organizations have transformed their whole work, the productive work, into online business or hybrid business. How they have done it. So depending on their creativity, this productivity will increase. And many of them have increased their productivity, like the advertisement companies, like the branding management companies, like the education industry. The education industry has improved like anything. Me, now I am always e-savvy. I have posted 39 YouTube videos. They have become very popular without any propaganda. About 1,500 subscriptions are there, and more than 20,000 viewers are there. I have not made any propaganda. YouTube is giving me, do it like this, do it like that. I don't have time to do all this business, but I can do it whenever I'll find time. So the point is, me, a simple person, a simple teacher, professor, is getting this, importance. So it is great for me. This is positive side of it.
That
Happiness.
is terrific. I'm going to just 1 minute to finish up, please.
Yes.
One more minute, please.
Yeah. There is enough tremendous happiness and fulfillment in life these days, because you get to, know each other. You get to know your family. Normally family, it was only a lodging. It was only a hotel to stay in the night and to have sex. That's all. And otherwise, now there is enough time, a lot of time to talk, a lot of time to settle problems, Cold War problems. Anyway, and it is producing a higher level of success. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love those ideas, and congratulations on your success and personal expansion of leisure. And so thanks for sharing about that upper class in India, and great ideas for research and that self-reflection. That's lovely. Brooke, do you want to add to how can leisure providers address these different disparities in leisure availability and or research directions?
Sure. Just again, to share some examples, our institution is grappling with telework policies, with occupations varying in terms of who would be allowed to telework and those that are needed at the organization, and opinions about telework also vary significantly. People are getting lots of mixed messages, and that comes a lot from how we define work and how we define leisure, and that is impacting these larger conversations that we're having. Folks working in leisure service do not really seem to have the choice because as I mentioned earlier, the American public has this strong desire to return to normal and have their experiences and their fun continue. I did pose this question to my students actually a few weeks ago in our introductory course, and just to get their feedback. And they told me, particularly when it comes to leisure opportunities, that they felt that the new safety precautions were likely not to go away. They felt that with public health playing more of a role in decision making, that in ways that they had never seen before, never experienced, or likely were not aware of. They suggest that people will continue to be more cautious and conscious about their health, and likely that may not be pervasive around the United States, but it's important for us to consider as we're training these new, potentially new leisure professionals. I think employers in the United States in general are taking a look at their telework and sick policies really closely, and what that means. I've had employees here say, you know, I don't have sick time. Can I work from home? And again, it varies. This is new, right? What is sick and how do we help them be well versus how do we continue to support their productivity? And there's that conversation that has to be had in terms of weighing that importance. I see mental health as being considered more frequently as a reason to be working from home or taking time off. And again, with leisure, we're seeing more esports, concerts that are happening virtually, conferences, as many folks have already alluded to, personal training, all available virtually now and likely here to stay. Many organizations are trying to connect both, as we all are in the classroom as well. How do we connect two audiences together and provide a service or an experience that meets their needs? Those that can adapt, those leisure organizations that can adapt to offer both, are more successful, and they're finding ways to really benefit a wider audience. And just anecdotally, in Minnesota, we had parks and trails during the pandemic see double-digit increases. But on the flip side, we also saw municipalities get serious reductions in staff, departments cut in half, positions being eliminated, funding in general being cut. And those two things do not align. And so we have to really, we'll get to this in the next question, but we have to do a better job of telling our story and how important leisure is to individuals' well-being. And again, thinking about how do we leverage our collective knowledge to really show how our work matters, and having conversations in our institutions with our students and our colleagues about that. I'm not sure if the telework will become more pervasive or less pervasive than leisure, but definitely seeing a growing group of people who are becoming more comfortable with multiple options.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the insights and attention to telework. Jackie.
Thanks. I think we have there's so many parallels, particularly between us and the United States, as much as Canadians hate to admit that, in many realms, mostly sport related. But so I think we're seeing those similar challenges, right? We're seeing the rise of particularly in the fitness, that telefitness. I had a student tell me the other day, you need to look at Yoga by Adriene. She's just dropped some new stuff and it's really great. And so we're seeing this reluctance of people to go back into gyms, to go back into those places that maybe they don't feel totally safe, or they're picking up on the convenience. So this is the way that they're finding that work-life balance is also in that leisure realm. So bringing the leisure into their home allows them to be able to do it on their schedule, fit it into their timing. But I wonder if it's truly leisure, or if it's more, it becomes an obligatory activity they fit into the day as part of that health regime. I feel like I'm back in my PhD discussing what is leisure. So I think there is those sort of things that we need to look at from a sort of a fundamental perspective. I think what's really sort of revealed itself in some of the research we've been doing here, and myself and some colleagues have done some research looking at how individuals in Canada used leisure to deal with pandemic stress. And as part of that, we were tracking sort of their activity participation, and then how did public health related restrictions impact on that. And what came through like absolutely clear and was, it's not a huge surprise, but some of the growths were the surprise. Anything that was not facility based increased during the pandemic. Everything that was outside increased during the pandemic. And this is where I said that there's inequities in this discussion of lockdown. For us, our public health officer was encouraging us to go for a walk, to get outside, to maintain distance, but even to have a little bit of social contact. At various points, it was only with your households, then it was with like, maybe 1 or 2 households. We had very explicit rules for individuals who were single households. So if you were one person living alone, you were actually able to connect with another household to be part of that safe bubble, even when we were limited to only staying within your house. So I think that really helped us. We had this recognition from the public health perspective that activity outside, particularly physical activity, was a vital component. And our Dr. Henry actually would speak about going for a run herself or going for an evening walk herself. So I think that elevated that conversation a little bit. At the same time, conversations with my colleagues in the field who, manage recreation services and facilities, they just shut the doors. They tried to figure out how they were going to sort of reposition what their staff were doing. We had some crowd control and public health things where they could do that. They could do some information sharing, but like what happened in the United States, Brooke, we saw that reduction, a temporary reduction of staff. What we're facing now is that some of those people left the workforce, particularly the younger staff members. So we are in a huge hiring issue right now and labor shortage. And that's really impacting on the recovery efforts of public recreation to be able to deliver services for all. The other thing that really has really sort of percolated to the surface and the public consciousness is the inequities in our society. And I think that's even percolating up in the recreation piece. The conversations that we were having about recreation services were largely about, let's get kids back playing hockey. Let's get kids back doing these activities that when you really dig into it, we're not talking about the unprivileged members of our society. So it is, I think, forced some people to look at how much privilege is based into public recreation and replicated through public recreation. And I'll get more into that when we get into the next question. But I do think when we look at that leisure for all and how do we provide services, I do think we have this sort of different lens now on who we are actually serving and how do we service that going forward. Like the comment in the chat section from Catherine, British Columbia saw an explosion of outdoor recreation. Here on Vancouver Island, we live in this beautiful location of outdoor playground, and our parks were full. Some of them were reduced capacity, but every spot was full for the vast majority of the pleasant seasons to camp, as it were. We saw our campgrounds fill with Canadians who could not go to the United States for their snowbird season, because we tend to be one of the warmest spots in the country throughout the winter, wettest but warmest. And so we really saw this change, but paralleling that, we saw record numbers of search and rescue. We saw record numbers of serious injury going within that. I'm working with the Parks and Recreation Association of the Yukon right now, looking at how the pandemic impacted on the physical activity of Yukoners. And what has become clear, because we asked about pre-COVID behavior as well as impact, is that a lot of the things that we define recreation as, right, those sports and leisure activities, facility-based things, were not what Yukoners were doing even before the pandemic. And so I think as we move forward into this recreation for all and trying to figure out how do we start offering services across our economic spectrum, we also need to really dig into what are we offering and who are we offering it for and why are we offering it? Because we have largely created systems through our public school systems, but through our recreation system where our predominant focus is on sport and on some form of physical activity. And maybe that's taking us away from our roots where leisure is about rejuvenation and relaxation. And how does all that fit into the need for reflection and mental health? And so I'm going to leave it there because if not, I'm going to go into what do we need to research next?
No, thank you so very much. Great. Why don't we give each panelist a minute to respond to each other if desired, and we'll start where we began. Sukant, do you have any comments or sharing or parallels with India and comments Brooke or Aggie made?
I think we have agreed upon a few points. You know what is going on, that this is an era of global village. You understand, global village. So we are into great communication system, which has been enhanced during these days more. And day by day, we're progressing through our technology. So the e-technology is wonderful. The software developed is just great. So most of the things are similar. I mean, except for the fact that we are absolutely culturally different from the West. But we had a Western influence. Both, we were under 200 years. And number two, and USA is dominating everywhere. And for example, I was in Canada before the pandemic. For some time, there was an international sociological congress in Canada. So we were there, you know. The point is, almost similar things, whatever they are sharing, we are getting the news. So we are also doing this. What is Netflix? We Indian, or I am from Lucknow or for Delhi, is not running Netflix, you know. So obviously Netflix is seen by everyone. So what is the point? Which the next question I am going to tell you, what are the points of research which has to be conducted? This is what you have posed the question. That I'll tell you. So we are sharing almost similar things, except for the fact we are culturally different, but we have learned what is the West doing, and they have also learned what we are doing, like yoga, for example. They have also learned. It is called a process of acculturation. We learn something from each other, but we maintain our own identity. This is important in globalization. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Brooke, anything to add or comment on?
Sure, just to add what Dr. Wayhill talked about in terms of the inequities in access. When we think about telework or teleleisure, one of the pervasive ones in the United States is access to internet. That has been a significant problem in terms of who is allowed to engage in that. We have students writing 20-page papers on a cell phone. You know, we have kids in elementary school who don't have internet at home, who have been told that that's how they have to learn for the next few weeks at a time or months at a time. And so that, along with the things that both of them have shared, are part of the experience in the United States as well.
Thank you. All right, so our third and final question, we will start with Dr. Berg, and it relates to the most important or pressing future directions in work and leisure research. If you would, 5-ish minutes up to.
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the pressing ones, and I probably mentioned this throughout, is that policies about work and leisure really tend to privilege certain folks over others, and whiteness is pervasive in the policy development and implementation throughout the United States in either of those worlds. And many policies are really written from a deficit model. Just to share an example with you, I have invited Dr. Janice Crow. Some of you may be familiar with her. She is an expert in trauma-informed teaching. And she does this exercise with the participants in the workshop where she presents a series of invitations to a social gathering. The first is, I want to invite you to dinner. Can't wait to see you. To come to dinner, but don't be late. And the third is typically something like, you better be at this dinner. If you're late, I'm going to lock the door, and don't bring that horrible dish that you brought the last time. Right. And the conversation that follows is about how we, in that context, create a syllabus or how we communicate with our students. But I see a strong connection between just that exercise and that thinking about the exercise and how we interact and connect with individuals across society in our communities and at our organizations. And again, policies are often written as a way to punish behavior that employers find undesirable. And so they want to prevent that from happening rather than recognizing the human that's behind that and the other things that might be going on. And we typically, like I said, we don't see the human first. As I mentioned, whiteness is extremely pervasive in the policies in the United States, and that needs to be addressed in research and also in practice. You know, whiteness really allows for work and leisure to be put in these separate boxes in the United States, intended to be very, very different things. And we have policies and laws that support this. Simple examples to share, you know, cell phone use policies, computer use policies, loitering at particular establishments or organizations. Again, minor, but things that we have to look at and what are we saying about work and leisure. And really, I think it's important for us to be finding outlets for research, because we have an ample amount of research across the world about the importance of leisure. The pandemic has showed us how important leisure is to our lives, but really connecting it to our general population and those who have the ability to influence decision makers about the importance of this research and this work. You know, during the pandemic, we had some folks who were gaining new hobbies, while others were just hoping that leaders in America would help them keep their homes so that they could feed their families and get access to food. Just as an example, we have a food pantry on our campus that has served over 11,000 students, averaging 125 meals a day. And so that it needs to be addressed. And the other thing is we've talked a lot about caregiving and those responsibilities. We equate caregiving with work. And so rethinking what caregiving is. Is it work? Is it something else? And do we have to have those two different topics?
Thank you so much. Really important and insightful. Sukant, would you like to share some future directions, pressing directions for work leisure?
For the researchers, okay, this is important for the researchers. What the researchers must do, I am also a researcher, but principally we think researchers are of two types. One is a beginner. Beginner means those who are doing PhD, doctorate, PhD. What should they do? Those who are doing PhD in leisure studies or sociology of leisure or anthropology of leisure. There are three things: sociology of leisure, anthropology of leisure, leisure studies. Three different departments. What should they do these days after this pandemic? Which we have already spoken about that, but let us note it down. Okay, number one, what are the new hobbies developed after this online or hybrid business started? Very important. What are the new hobbies? You would ask me, autoethnography. Autoethnography means talking about my narrative. Where I stay is a university bungalow. You understand bungalow? Okay. University bungalow, which has a huge lawn, and we have employed a gardener. They're all cheaper in India. We have employed a gardener. My brother stays in Atlanta. I visited him thrice. You understand Atlanta? All right. Atlanta. They also have a garden. But they cannot employ a gardener. It's very, very, costly. And anyway, so I have started. Though the gardener is there, the gardener never came for 90 days because of lockdown. So I had to run the grass cutter machine. That was too much. I'm not a farmer. I'm not a peasant. I cannot. I fell sick. But I developed and how to run the cutter and seeder. I tried all this at this age. I did everything. Now I said jokingly, light of vein to the gardener, you stop walking. I can do everything. For example, he said, no, you cannot do it, sir. I am specialist. You are specialist in teaching. You are specialist in speaking. You are specialist in, talking nonsense. He says like this in local language. You talk nonsense. You cannot do it. Okay, fine. All right. So anyway, that is one of the hobbies I have developed. All right. And this is one. One must research on hobbies, new hobbies in the 20s, days to come. Just see what is happening. No hope of full offline for at least coming 4 or 5 years, because we will be developing, we have already developed a great interest in online hybrid things. Nothing will happen like this. Okay, then what I spoke, what I am doing now, it is yet to come, it is coming out. That class-based ledger pattern, inequalities do class, whether this class-based ledger pattern has changed. Has the inequality changed with respect to ledger? This is very important, because what is the upper class was doing? Are they doing the same thing now? And what is the middle class or lower class doing? Are they doing the same thing now? Or has it changed? Have they adjusted with the new situation? Is there any structural change? This point should be taken into consideration. Is there any structural change in ledger pattern? Structure is a big issue. Social structure, not physical structure. Social structure, it is like this. And sometimes riot takes place like this. In USA, the boy kills 15, it is like this. Then again, social control takes into account, it is like this. Goes on like this, then second day this, third day this, fourth day this, like this. This is social structure. Okay. So what is this social structure is getting transformed, and people are getting adjusted like this. Suddenly they face this for 12 months. Now they are gradually coming like this. They may come like this again. So it's like this. All right, ma'am. Then, so this is the second one, structural transformation. Wait a second, wait. Let me speak.
Yeah.
2 minutes. But otherwise it will be boring. I have written so much. It will be boring otherwise. Okay, I'll limit it. Number three, one must work on, besides this class-based ledger pattern, one must work on students. The students, not students of ledger, students at every level, elementary level, middle level, higher level, everywhere. What is happening to the students? What is happening to students? How they have adjusted? What is happening to the 21st century students? Those who are born in 2000 afterwards. How they have adjusted? We are, if you remember, all of you, you are from academics, hopefully. If you are, I don't know how old you are, I won't ask anyway. What I'm trying to say, we have seen, I am the life member of 11 societies. So I used to get 11 journals. Where do I keep them? Where do I keep 11 journals? Now, out of 11, 5 have made it online compulsory. I said, okay, I'll adjust, but I have never read those online things. There is no time. At least that offline journal used to come. I used to, browse through. Okay, this is important. This is important. So I'll tear it off and put it in a file. So wherever it is required, I'll just go through it like this. So this online business is changing. Now every journal will have online. This 21st century children, 2000 born afterwards, they are all interested in online business only. They are already online savvy. So for them, it is not a problem. For we old people, it is a problem. I mean, we means whoever is 60 or more than. Today, somebody said, so some article I read, old age starts at 80. Doesn't matter. 80. Anyway, the third thing, education, students. And the fourth thing, what about these games? Candy Crush, PUBG from Play Stores. What are its future? What is happening? People have not read it. They're ledger patterns. They must study on this. And the sample has to be big, cross-cultural sample, across cultures, Indonesia, Canada, US, France, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, everywhere, Japan, Russia. It's very difficult, I understand. But if somebody sponsors UN type sponsors, then we can enter into that. Great. And then the music apps. Oh, so much of music. Terrible. And in our time, there's not so much of music. And now we have purchased Alexa. Alexa tells you everything. And throughout the day and the evening also, Alexa is going on now. This is my house. This is my home. This is my office room at home. Alexa goes on there. Alexa, sing this, do that. Oh, great. So Alexa is of great help these days, and other musical instruments are of great help. People have started, in India, there is not much, savvy of guitar. They have started guitar, this, that, rock music, this music. Great. Wonderful. So one must research on this transformation of music, musical instruments, use of musical instruments like this. I have listed 20, but I have told you 6. Fine, Ingrid?
Thank you very much. Yes, we just want to make sure everyone has a chance to share. So I appreciate that. Great examples. Thank you. And Aggie, do you want a few minutes, please? And then we'll see if and what our folks are sharing in the chat and answer those questions.
Yeah, certainly. I think that, the research questions that have been raised already are important ones. And I think when I think of my own context here in Western Canada, I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around the social inequities and how do we provide service for those who've largely been invisible or ignored within our systems. I do think that some of the big areas where I would like to see some change and some focus is having physical education in the school system. So Kent, I totally agree. We need to focus on children. I mean, the research from the 80s and 90s was clear about starting and ceasing behavior, leisure behaviors. You need to start young. You're more likely to carry it through. But does physical education in our school systems really serve a successful aging health and wellness perspective? Or is it simply part of the sport development system? And just to be clear, I'm not anti-sport. I'm actually like a sport junkie and really love it. But as someone who studies leisure, I think that we put an over-reliance on sport. And I also think that we often treat sport as something benign and healthy. And particularly from a feminist lens, sport can be a very damaging space for girls and a place that really is exclusionary for many females. So I think that looking from that policy perspective, do we need to start advocating for a leisure education rather than a physical education model within our public school systems? And do we also need to look at that from the public recreation perspective? Do we need to come back to more of the leisure education versus physical activity, sport provision, so the providing of the facilities for those sports to happen? And so I think there's some really good questions that can be happening that from a structural perspective. Here in Canada, you know, our federal government has recently brought in legislation around 10 days of paid sick leave. But when you dig into it, it applies to federal employees and federally regulated industries. So that's airlines, transportation, that kind of thing. Provincially, they brought in 5 days of paid sick leave, and that is to apply across the board. And so, you know, we can see some of how those things play out. We do have maternity and paternity leave, upwards of 18 months. And it's not full salary. So again, there's some of those things that are about, you know, can you actually afford to take the time, or who can afford to take the time? But we have it, right? Like, let's be clear, there's some privilege within that itself. And so I think that there's lots of questions for us to be answering. I think one of the big pieces from an outdoor recreation perspective for me is researching not just, you know, increased activity and the benefits of that, but what's the way that we can actually prepare people for being outside. And this again comes back to me from that what do we teach kids in school? What do we teach kids in our recreation programming? So along with the learn to swim, learn to skate, do we need to have learn to hike, learn to camp? Because part of the increase in our search and rescue callouts was people who were looking for that outlet who didn't necessarily have the skills, but you don't know what you don't know. And I think Instagram and many other social media, I feel so old when I'm saying these things, but Instagram and some of those older other technologies have sort of disguised the challenge. And then I think that the last piece for me is more of a challenge to ourselves as, you know, leisure professionals and leisure professors. What are the messages that we're sharing? How do we communicate out how important we actually are? So I did a really blatant self-promotion. I tossed in a file that's actually a QR code. We've launched something through our World Leisure Center of Excellence that we're calling our Leisure Matters platform. And the whole purpose of that platform is to sort of amplify the work we're doing in the department, the work that our students are doing. So, you know, we've learned from our Center of Excellence in Innovation and Learning, Brooke, and we're trying to get rid of that disposable assignment and having our students create things that we can then share out. So it's a platform where we can amplify how we are essential. And I think, and this is, I straddle the world of sort of pure recreation and tourism. Tourism has always done a great job of communicating its essentialness through economic development. And then some of the less fuzzy stuff around, you know, it's all about building, you know, global connections, which we can argue that to the cows come home. I think recreation, particularly through the benefits movement, we stuck with the less tangible kind of fluffy benefits to what we do. And even when we researched those, we communicated them more to ourselves than to other people. And I think that if we're going to really strengthen our role in society as part of the solution moving forward, we have to figure out a way to how do we communicate that we are essential. We're essential part of the healthcare system. We're essential part of ensuring that people and communities are well, that they're sustainable, that they're healthy. And so I think there's research that needs to go into that side of how do we articulate that we're not just a cost item on a budget, but we're actually a revenue generation through tax or through savings. And I'm going to do one more plug, and it's actually for a work for one of my colleagues does, Joanne Schroeder, a program called the Recreation Prescription. And this is the other piece. It's this idea of we need to be transdisciplinary. And so she worked with colleagues in the Health and Human Services, Child and Youth Care, and our physical education crew here on campus to work with the the grade 5 students in our least economically developed schools. So schools where the kids aren't wearing shoes that fit them. That's part of why they're not being active. Their parents are those ones that are suffering from extreme time poverty. So they're not having the time to drive kids to activities, even if they're free. And so through that programming, they really took that model of leisure education into the classroom. And they also then realized, hey, wait a minute, there needs to be a food program here as well as part of this. And so I think that we need to take programs like that and figure out how we partner, because one of our key partners with that was the City of Nanaimo Parks, Recreation and Culture. And figuring out how do we bridge all those gaps. So lots of research for us to do. For the most part, I think we need to stop researching the privileged and we need to start researching those who are somewhat invisible in our programming. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, what a terrific collection of ideas. There's certainly some common themes and some very interesting additions. So I know we are getting close to the ending time of the webinar. And so if you have pressing questions yourself, please drop them in the chat. Someone did ask about MindSport as a, I think that was in relation to the change in physical education that you mentioned, Aggie. So I don't know if you know about MindSport.
I was gonna say MindSport is not something I'm familiar with.
Nor am I. I know esports, but I don't know MindSports unless we're talking yoga or something. That's
I believe that's referring to chess and things that require mental abilities, which I honestly had to look up.
Thank you. I could not Google it while I was facilitating.
Yeah, and Samantha, thanks for bringing that one forward. I truly believe, I think this is where we've sort of moved away from this idea of that leisure is beyond just physical activity. It's beyond being busy, doing something. And I saw a promotional video for, of all things, the BC Ale Trail. So it's craft brewing, but it was a local craft brewery here in town. They are promoting that they have a great space and they've got a whole bunch of board games. So they're like, come on down, have some beer, meet some new people and play board games all night. And I'm like, that brilliant. How do I take my class there without getting in trouble for taking them to a brewery?
Great. Well, I'm going to take a moment and ask everyone to perhaps unmute if you're here and give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, the time and energy and the preparation. And so certainly we can maybe have a second panel to get all of the information that you prepared. Really, thank you. I'm going to turn it back and thank each and every one of you.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say, one second. What I'm trying to say, when you have asked, when you have performed this, the best way to preserve and spread it is to ask the panelist and 3 more people or 5 more people to produce on paper, article, research paper, whatever they have spoken on these 3 questions with an introduction, with some theoretical background, and prepare that and give it to us. We have a International Sociology of Leisure journal published from London. Okay, we can try it there. Or there is another journal from India, we can try it there. A special issue of leisure. Well, I hope both of you, the panelists, would contribute definitely. It will take some time with proper referencing and theoretical background of leisure studies. Without theory, there is no generalization. Generalization is based on your experience plus case studies and some statistics. You understand the research paper, okay? Please produce that. And maybe the comparer, the coordinator, Ingrid may produce one, and a few more people may produce. And Ingrid, you take the initiative, and Aggie, you take the initiative. I can also take the initiative. I will produce 2 papers. We require 7 to 8 papers to produce a special volume. I request all of you, then only this webinar will be thinking successful in this online business, hybrid business.
I think this is a wonderful idea. And I think in general, these webinars is an amazing opportunity to connect people from across the world and kind of find the expert. And so we encourage our audience also to reach out to our panelists. And if you have any questions, if you would like to work or collaborate, this is the opportunity to bring people together. So thank you again, panelists, amazing discussion. Thank you, audience, for staying engaged and keeping the conversation going. Thank you, Ingrid, so much for having discussions so kind of vibrant and fluent and just providing also additional kind of thoughts on that. And thank you, Mona, for helping moderate and keep track of technology piece. Again, thank you, everybody. And we hope you'll join our future webinars. We do not have set dates yet for next year, but we'll definitely provide this information through the listservs and on our social media through the Academy of Leisure Sciences. Thank you all, and hopefully you will enjoy your weekend, and happy holidays who have holidays coming up. So yeah, bye everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye. Take care. Bye bye.